Okay, good evening. Continuing with the Parsha of the week. Last week we finished the book of Leviticus. This week in the Torah readings we're up to the beginning of the book of Bamidbar. So in English it's translated as Numbers. In Hebrew the word Bamidbar means in the desert. So I'm going to read you the beginning of this week's Torah portion. So just a quick recap where we were, where we've come up to. The Jewish people have come out of Egypt. We've had the whole Exodus story. We've had the Jewish people coming to Mount Sinai, receiving the divine revelation of God at Mount Sinai, and the people building a mishkan, building a tabernacle that will be the so to speak the place where the divine presence will rest. And now the people, it's a year later, and the people are ready to move on. They're going to be moving away from the Mount Sinai, and God is telling Moses in this week's Torah portion. Hashem spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after the Exodus from the land of Egypt, saying, "Take a census of the entire assembly of the children of Israel, according to their families, according to their father's household, by number of the names, every male according to their head count." And then we go on and we learn about the census. So the word that I want to focus in on is Bamidbar, in the wilderness, in the desert. And we all, up until this point have been aware of the fact that God's revelation happened at Mount Sinai, and we've talked about the fact that it was a low mountain, it was a very quote-unquote humble mountain, but also to take note of the fact that this mountain was not in the land of Israel. It's not the destination, it's not where we're heading to. We headed towards Mount Sinai, but we were in the wilderness. And this whole now traveling through the wilderness that the Jewish people are going to be engaged in, we're going to learn about what's going to happen through those sojourns through the desert. Why a desert? What's the wilderness about? Why was it that the Torah wasn't given to us in Israel? Why is it given in the desert? And what is it about the desert that we need to understand something about? So part of what's happening in the desert is that it's very barren. There isn't a hubbub. It's not a crowded place. It's not a place where there's activity. It's a silent place. It's a place far away from distractions. It's a vulnerable place. It's a place where you could get lost. It's a place where you could feel isolated. So all of these factors of the desert indicate to us that this is the ideal ground for the Jewish people to learn how to undo their slave mentality, having come out of Egypt, having been freed and come through the Reed Sea, and they come to Mount Sinai and they have this revelation of God. And now there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do to understand how to live our lives in relationship to God. God, a personal God, not a transcendent God, a transcendent God, not only a transcendent God, not only a God that does big miracles and brings the people out from within the midst of another people, but a God that looks after us, a God that takes care of us, a God that is imminently present in our lives. And for us to understand that and for us to learn that took us 40 years. So interestingly, many times in our tradition, we learn about the number 40 and what the number 40 indicates. So there are, if I just point out a few of the 40s, there were 40 days and nights that Noah in the ark, the whole ark experience of the flood, 40 days and 40 nights. A gestation of a fetus takes 40 weeks for a fetus to gestate healthily and normally, and that's a 40 week process. We have 40 years in the desert. We have Moses up on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. There's a lot of 40s. The mikveh, the holy waters, the spiritual, natural waters that we enter into to be reborn is a new entity, whether it's somebody who is converting to Judaism, whether it's somebody getting married, whether it's somebody transitioning to death. Those are all opportunities for us to enter into a mikveh, and the measurement of a mikveh is 40 se'ir. There are 40 units of water in a mikveh. So all of these 40s indicate that the number 40 has something special about it. What is it special? It's special because it transitions us from one reality to another. It changes us. We get reborn. When we come out of a mikveh, we're reborn. When Noah came out of the ark, it was a new world. Everything had changed. It was new. when the Jewish people traverse the desert for 40 years and 40 nights, by the time they get ready to enter the land of Israel, they're a different people. They've undone the mentality of coming out of Egypt, of being the slaves. It's a new generation that's going to go in. It's a generation that's learnt to rely on God, to have emunah, to have faith in God, to understand that their food comes from heaven in the form of manna, that their water comes out of a rock, that quails, when they craved meat, quails came from the sea and were blown in, that they were protected by the clouds of glory that surrounded them and protected them, that they were taken care of by the pillar of fire that led them on their way. All of these ways in which the Jewish people, through their traveling through the desert for 40 years, were able to transition into people who were then ready, poised, and we'll keep going as we go through the story, how they enter into the land of Israel and what that looks like. So the people, when they were at Mount Sinai, ready to get that Torah in the desert, right? So it's very crucial that it happened in the desert, that it was not in Israel. It was something where anybody could access it. Our Torah and the wisdom that God gave to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai is accessible to everybody. No, it's an equalizer, right? We all have access to it. And I think that's another point, that when we, the Jewish people, stood at Mount Sinai and we had that mass revelation and we understood that God is giving us a guidebook for how to live our lives, that we were like it says in the Torah, that we were ish echad belev echad, that we were like one people with one heart. We were united as one people, and with that unity there was peace, and in that place of peace the Torah could be given. So there's a very interesting medrash that I want to read you. The Medrash Rabbah says, when the celestial beings, when the angels were consulted, because God said, let us make man. At the beginning of Genesis, the Medrash tells us that before God created man, he said, he consulted with the celestial angels. And when they were consulted regarding the creation of man, the angels of kindness and charity were in favor, because man will perform acts of kindness and charity. However, the angels of truth and peace opposed the creation, because man would be full of deceit and strife. So God took truth and he flung truth down to the ground. And since truth and peace are tied together, that's the job that we have to do, is bring that truth and that peace together and reunite them. When we stood at Mount Sinai, the truth was apparent, and there was peace amongst us. The dissension that is now pervading our world is because we're all scattered. We're not united. We're not centralized around a common sense of the truth, and there isn't peace in the world. So our job is to try to bring that peace and tie it to truth and bring that all forward. So when we were at Sinai and we had a unity and we had peace, then the truth was given to us. There was this great. There was the great possibility for that to then be taken forward. However, then we have the issue of the golden calf and what the people did, and things fell apart. And we're trying to return to that time, return to the time of peace and unity and truth. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to interject there. So this idea of the Torah being given in the wilderness, and the idea that we had to go through the wilderness experience, we had to be in a place of silence, we had to be in a place where we understood that we could not survive without God taking care of us, that the food that we had, the water we had, the directions in which we traveled, that there was a great obvious reliance on God to take care of us. We obviously in this world don't have that. We have a sense that we are in control and we're in power, but maybe with COVID we have a little bit more sense that we're out of control and things are not so in our control. But in general, we live in a world where we feel like we can harness it and we can milk it, and it's in our power and it's in our control. So here we are. We're in the desert, Bamidbar. So one way of translating Bamidbar is in the wilderness. It's also another way to translate that is that we were led, that to be led, that God led us, that we were on some level followed God into. It's almost like a bride and groom following each other into the sunset. That we followed God into the desert. Unknown, not knowing where our food's going to come from, not knowing where anything's come from. We trusted God. He took us out from slavery and he brought us into the desert, and we trusted him. There was a certain level of letting go and saying, okay, I don't know where I'm going to get my meal from, and as God unfolds his divine providence and takes care of us, we become more and more and more aware of God's presence and understand God. And on some level, I don't really know what the Israelites in the desert understood God to be, but much more obvious God intervention than we have today. However, there was this sense that God was in their midst, and the Mishkan that they built, this tabernacle that we built, that we talked about all through the book of Vayikra, was this quote unquote a little apartment for God to reside in our midst. And when we finished it and when we completed it exactly as God had told us, then God descends and God is in our midst, and we feel it and we know it, and it's joyous and it's wonderful. So now God's going to count us, and he says, now I'm going to count you. I want to know, my lovely Jewish people, how many of you are there? It's almost like many of the commentators liken that unto anything that you have that you value. Perhaps you value. I value. Well, we all value children, so we count the children. We count our money. We count our whatever it is. You count up something that you value, and so that's given as one of the reasons why the Jewish people were counted. We were counted because God loves us. So that's a nice warm fuzzy reason. Another reason is because the people who were 20 years and older were counted. They were the people that we needed to know how many men could fight in armies if we ended up having to fight any peoples along the way, or we had to fight our way into Israel. Then how many soldiers do we have? Then we needed to know that. Another reason that we were counted is so that when we went into Israel, we know how to divide up the land. How are we going to divide up the land between all the people? So through this week's Torah portion, we learn about how the 12 tribes divide up by how many people there are in each tribe. So the tribes back up to the 12 sons of Jacob, our forefather. And so each son has his own encampment. Each tribe has his own encampment. Each tribe has his own leaders, his own prince, has his own flag. They have a flag that is their specific flag. On the flag is a specific color. And the color of the flag relates back to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who had, if you remember, we spoke before about the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol had with the 12 different jewels in it, each one representative of a different tribe of the Jewish people. So each of those jewels was a different color, and that color represented that tribe. So if you were of the tribe of Yehuda, then you had a flag, and on the flag was a lion, because that's the symbol, that's the blessing that Jacob gave his son Yehuda, that he would be like a lion. And the color is the same color of the color on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest. And then they would have a prince, and they would be positioned around the Mishkan. So the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is the center of the camp. And camped around the Mishkan are the Leviim, who are the descendants of Aaron, are the descendants of Moses and Aaron. They are around the Mishkan, and then around that are the 12 tribes. So there's 4 encampments, north, south, east, and west, and each one has 3 tribes in each north, south, east, and west position. So there's 4 camps of 3 tribes. Each tribe has its own flag, its own color, its own emblem, and its own prince. And there was no argument. The tribes didn't, I want to be over here, or I want to be on the east, or I want to be in the west. There wasn't an argument. Why? Because the way in which they were positioned around the tabernacle was exactly the same way that they were positioned when the original sons of Jacob carried Jacob to his final resting place. When they carried his bier, when they carried his coffin, the 12 sons were positioned by Jacob in this same configuration. So the same configuration that Jacob positioned his sons around to carry his funeral procession is the same configuration of how the Jewish people are now encamped around the Mishkan, which is kind of like takes away any kind of arguing with Moses about, no, I want to be here, or that's more coveted, or that's not the right place for me, or I want to be over here. It was all set up back when Jacob was dying, and he set it up. This is how I want to be carried. This is the configurations. So what's very interesting is when God comes down, when he reveals himself on Mount Sinai, there's a medrash that tells us that that angels came down to. There were hosts of angels came down when God is revealing himself to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people saw the angels, and they saw that the angels had flags. The angels had a banner. It's almost like a banner represents your essence. Not quite sure how that works when we look at our national flags, not sure about that. But these flags that were in the desert were flags that kind of somehow represented your character, represented your mission, who you were, what your essence was. So Yehuda the lion was, had the characteristics of a lion, and was able to be passionate and able to be, like strong, and all of these characteristics were then embodied by the tribe of Yehuda, and so on with Judah, and so on with the other tribes. That the flag wasn't just a pretty color, that it represented them. And when the people saw the angels coming down, and the angels had banners, they wanted banners too. Like, we want to be like the angels. We want to be like the angels because they also have banners and they also have flags. But I also want to be like the angels because the angels are a conduit for doing God's work in this world. That they come down, they have a mission to do. Each angel has a name, and the name represents the mission that the angel has to do in this world. So for instance, there's an angel called Raphael. And the angel Raphael has a mission to heal people. That's his mission, is to come down and create health in the world, to cure people of diseases, to help people become better. And that's why when in Hebrew, when you want to wish somebody that should be well, we say you should have a refuah shalema, you should have a full and complete recovery. And the angel that's going to be the intermediary between God and the healing is the angel Raphael, the angel of God who represents and is as the messenger to bring healing into the world, is the angel Raphael. So we want to be like the angels, not just having a banner and not just, being in close contact with God, but we want to be like angels in that we also want to recognize what our mission is. We also want to recognize what makes us different, who we are different from the other person, what makes the tribe of Yehuda different than the tribe of Reuven, or different than the tribe of, whoever, Gad and Benjamin, or like these other tribes. What is different about them? And I think that's really what's crucial about this week's Torah portion, is the differences between people. Like, yes, we're the same. We have a lot of similarities and we have a lot of things that connect us. And yet we are super duperly individualistic. We are very different people. Like, we have different combinations of gifts and strengths and so on and so on. And so the paradox of our lives is that we are individuals and we are also part of a collective where we're all the same. And when Abraham, back in Genesis, is blessed, God blesses that the Jewish people that could descend from Abraham will be two things. We will be like the sand on the seashore, and we will be like the stars in the heavens. We'll be both. And if we just tease that out a little bit, what that means is that when we're like sand, there's not individuals. We're just a mass of sand. We're part of a collective. We have a purpose. We have a job to do that's part and parcel of sand, of part of being part of a collective, something that bigger than us. I'm part of something bigger than just me. I'm a little piece of sand. I'm part of this big sand. The sand on the beach or the sand in the desert. But I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm a part of that. So there's a loss of the individualism, but there's a gain of the bigger picture that I'm a part of, which is the blessing that comes from you shall be like the sand in the seashore. The blessing of you shall be like stars in the sky is that recognize that each one of you has a name. And there's an understanding that God names all the stars. So every star has a name, even though there's, I don't know how many billions of stars there are, but God knows the name of each star. Each star has its own essence and has its own light to shed into the world. And so too, each one of us have are like stars, like we're a superstar or we're an all-star. The star metaphor is that we are individuals with our own characters, with our own strengths, and that we matter. We have a name that really is important because we're individuals. We're not the same as everybody else. We're not numbers. There's a program called Names Not Numbers that high school kids do in Jewish high schools, where they learn about some Holocaust survivors who had names tattooed onto their arms. We all know about that. And the idea of the Nazis was to make us all just into a number, that your name is irrelevant. You're just a number. You don't count. You don't matter. There's nothing special about you. You're just like like a sand, like a piece of sand that we can trample on, that we can get rid of. Right? And so this program called Names Not Numbers is to say, no, that's not the truth of the matter. The truth is we have a name, and our name is a fundamental essence of who we are. Our name represents us. Our name is who we are. Like, if you want to communicate to somebody really deeply, you use their name. Actually, sometimes it bothers me when you call for a service center and they keep using your name over and over and over again. I'm sure it's a tool that they've been taught to do, to use a person's name, because it kind of personalizes the interaction. If I use your name, sometimes I meet people and I forget their name, and I hate it, because I feel like it puts a distance between me and them, because I can't remember their name, and their name is who they are. Like when somebody calls me Alyssa, like I perk up, like, oh yeah, you're actually talking to me. You're not just talking to the group, or you're talking to the room. Like when people individualize you by using your name, you feel different. You feel like you matter. You feel like there's something more important about you than just being one of the masses. So the difference between being like a name and a number, and I saw a talk by Rabbi Sachs where he likens it unto 3 different paintings. So he puts up on the screen a painting of Jackson Pollock, a painting of Monet, and a painting of I think it's Surratt, so who was the founder, or the very into Pointillism. So the Jackson Pollock just looks like a mess, right? There's lots of shapes and lots of colors, and it's all over the picture, meaning like this is an individual white mark, and this is a blue mark, and this is a green mark, and there are all these marks, but they don't seem to like come together into anything that looks like anything that we can recognize, and it just looks like a mess of colors. So they're individual colors and individual shapes, but they don't make up anything that is intelligent to us. So it just looks like a lot of colors on the canvas. So that would be like we're individuals, but we're not part of anything bigger than us. Then you have the Monet, where it's all kind of like, it's hard to pick out the details, and it's just all kind of one big picture. You stand back and you see the collective, and you see like it looks like a beautiful whatever it is, a sunset or a sea scene with some boats on it, but they're not clear, and it sort of all merges into one and together, sort of like the sand. And then you have the Pointillism, the Surratt, where you stand back and you see a picture, and it looks like a beautiful picture. If you get up really close, you can see every single dot. Every single dot is clear and individual and separate, and is integral to the painting. If you took out those dots and left, took out a few, you wouldn't have the picture. It wouldn't be the full picture. The full picture is attained by having all the dots and being able to recognize that each one is important. And without that one, or without that one, you don't have the entity. You don't have the beauty. You don't have what the artist is trying to convey out into to the viewer. So I think that's one way that we could understand. That's a parable for understanding how we are. So we, on one side, we are like the sand. We're part of something bigger than us, something that is a purpose that the Jewish people have in the world. And then on the other side, we're individuals, and each individual has to somehow find their mission. Like, what is it that I'm here to do? How can I put my stamp? What's my individual stamp? And nothing big, but even little things like, what am I doing? And here we are in COVID days, and we're in our homes, and what am I doing in my family? What am I doing in my home? What am I doing when I pick up the telephone? What am I listening to on the internet? Like, what am I, how am I keep moving? How am I putting kindness and compassion and truth and peace into the world? Like, little bits, like with this one neighbor, or this one interaction on the street, or whatever it is, that there's an individual purpose that each one of us has, and that it matters, and we're entrusted with that mission. Each one of us is entrusted with a mission, and we are not we really have to focus on the fact that we have enormous potential, and the potential that we have is because we're godly, because we have B'Tselem Elokim, we have an image of God, we have a soul, we have a spark of divinity within us that is ready to shine. And how do we let that shine? How is that star that was in us going to shine? How are we going to do that? I don't know. I'm working on it. But I think that this is something that we could think about. When we talk about Bamidbar, we talk about being in the desert, we talk about being isolated, right? We're away from the distractions of the world, which is what the Midbar was. And we travel through that Midbar, and we're traveling through our isolation. We're traveling along. We keep moving. We're not stuck. We have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. We're trying to learn something new, do something different, connect in a different way, whatever it is. But we don't stay stuck. Like the Jewish people are on a journey. The life world is on a journey. We talked about it last week. We talked about this notion of 6s and 7s, and we talked last week about the Shemitah year, which is the year in which the land lies fallow. So we have 6 years of working the land, 1 year where we leave it fallow. We have 6 work days and 1 7th day where it's a Shabbat. Shabbat is like a destination. We have reached the destination of Shabbat. We've reached the destination of the Shemitah of the fallow year in the 7th year. And after the 50 years, the Yovel year. And after our 6th millennium, we talked about this last week, the 6th millennium, we are in the 6th millennium right now, 5780. And at the end of this 6th millennium, we go into the 7th millennium, which is that rest, which is that world to come. We're heading in there. That's the destination. We have a destination. So as much as God's outside of time and sees all time and everything, the way it's going to go, we don't. And we see ourselves moving, and we talked about time being a vertical or inspiring helix, but we are heading somewhere, and there is a purpose to this world, and there is a captain at the helm. God's at the helm of this ship, that we're on a ship and we're heading somewhere, and that we have a role to play as we sit in this boat, and that we're not drilling a hole under our boat and like making it sink, that we're doing whatever we need to do to help the boat along, each one of us, like a point in the Seurat painting. So that's really important to understand, that's the way in which we can understand or take a message out from how these tribes are positioned around the central Mishkan. So we have our central Mishkan, and around the Mishkan we have our four directions, and each direction has 3 tribes assigned to it, and each tribe has an individual flag and an individual color and an individual emblem. There's individuality in our collective. So I think that dichotomy between us being individuals and celebrating that and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, like to really build that up and to work on our individualism within the collective, right? So that we have boundaries, we have something that kind of keeps us together. We have a common mission, we have a common idea of what we're trying to do in the world. There's a common mission, and when we use our individualism in a good way, then we're going to bring the collective along. And it's a very powerful idea, because as an individual we can only do so much, but as a collective we can do a whole lot. So yes, we're individuals, and yes, we're collective, and both of those together, even though they may seem antithetical, the Jewish way is both. We are both stars and have our own unique light, and we're also sand. We are both. And that's what's born out from this week's Torah portion. So we're in the Midbar. We're going through the Midbar. We're going to be in the Midbar for 40 years. We're going to birth ourselves into the land of Israel. We're going to be a different people when we get into the land of Israel. We have a lot of work to do on the way, just like we have a lot of work to do on our journey through life. God's going to count us, and he's going to count us, 1, because he loves us, 2, because we need a census of how many males there are. They're going to fight the battles, how we're going to divide up the land. This idea of counting, and it says in the Torah, the words used is going to raise up our heads, and it's the same idea, raising up by being counted. You're going to be counted because we need to understand that we're important. We're not lost in the mix. It's not like you don't matter, you really do matter. And we learn out that every life is infinitely valuable. And as you know, as a Jewish people, we do everything to save a life. Like, life is paramount. We do anything to save a life. That's pretty much up there as the most important value that we have, is to save lives and to bring lives into the world. That's like the Jewish value. L'chaim is really important, to bring life and to sustain life and to preserve life and to guard life and to look after our lives and to help other people look after their lives and to etc. to heal people, etc. The very, very, very high up there, biggest value is life. I'm not sure where I was going with that. Anyway, but we're in the desert and we're counting. So we're counting because we're important. We're all equal, right? So every single person is counted equally. Nobody's counted more than anybody else. And the way in which we're counted is that each person, would come before Moses and Aaron. Okay, so there were 603,550 men who were counted between the ages of 20 and 60. 603,550 men, right? So everybody was counted. I'm sure the women were also counted, the children were also counted, and the Levites, who were the children of Moses and Aaron, that they were counted from 1 month and up, not from 20 and up. And everybody was counted, but they were counted by going before Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron counted every single person, which is an amazing thing. The leaders, they got to interact with their leaders, right? So I don't know how that would work in the world today, but the idea that everybody was equally valuable to the leadership, right? The leadership wanted to bless everybody. The leadership wanted, if you ever heard stories about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, how people would come to him and they would flock to him and they would just literally one after another just, and he would give them $1 or he would give them a blessing. And he interacted with each one. Actually, I never really thought about it, but it's very similar perhaps to what Moses and Aaron did. They interacted with every single person. They gave every single person a blessing. They looked every person in the eye and said, hello, what's your name? They wanted to know the name and what tribe you came from, because the name was a sense of who you were and what your essence was, blessing a person. Like how incredibly powerful that was to feel like you mattered. You weren't just one of the masses. You were an important person, and you were seen by your leadership, by Moses and Aaron. They were seen by Moses and Aaron. They were counted individually, personally, and they mattered. And the word for accounting also has a similar meaning, as the word has a meaning also. It means to entrust, that we were entrusted with a job. Our job is to bring godliness into the world, to be a conduit for God in the world. And so we do it through how we act and what we do and how we behave, and that we are associating ourselves with God through the Torah, through the way we interact with the world and things that we do, etc., through the mitzvot, through the commandments that we're commanded to do, because it's a guidebook. The Torah is a guidebook for how to live our lives. So we all came before Moses and Aaron, and this raising up of our heads. It says that we were counted. It raised up our heads. It elevated us. We felt important, not in a arrogant way, but we felt important, that we have something important to do. We're not nothing. We're important. And so when we think about counting, and actually observant Jews today actually don't count pointing people. They're like 1, 2, 3. Which is why when the Jews were counted, they gave Moses and Aaron a half a shekel. Everybody gave Moses half a shekel and Aaron half a shekel, and then at the end of the day they would count up how many shekels they had, and then obviously then divide it in half, whatever. But they used the shekels to count. They didn't point at people and count them that way. And there's various reasons given as to why we don't actually point at somebody and count them that way. Does it bring in the evil eye, or does it whatever? There's various different reasons given, but just to take into account that that we're part of something, and that each one of us is equally valuable. We're all worth the same. We're all equal. We all have a job to do, and we're all equally important. Even if our job might be considered to be more important than the other person, everybody has to be part of the puzzle. Where the puzzle doesn't have a full picture if one piece is taken out. So you might be, the center of the puzzle and feel like you're the most important part of the puzzle, but if the corner piece isn't there, then it's not complete. It's not perfect. So to complete the puzzle, to complete the work that needs to be done, every single person needs to play their part. So I think that's a really good thing to bring out from this week's Torah portion, is this paradox of both aspects working simultaneously, our individualism and our collectiveness coming together. And the flag and the color and the prints and all of these things and the emblem on the flag these point to the character traits, the individual character traits. They say there's 70 faces to the Torah. That there are different ways to live your Torah, right? So some people might live it this way, and some people might live it that way. But if it's truth, it doesn't matter if it looks like that. It doesn't matter if you're wearing black and white. It doesn't matter if you're wearing green and orange, whatever. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. It doesn't matter if you have long payas. It doesn't matter, as long as you're connecting to the Torah and you're bringing truth and peace and compassion and love and godliness into the world, then you're doing your piece. You're doing your little piece on that corner. Okay, so they were encamped, and they were encamped in a specific way, and they were encamped in a specific way that didn't lead to any animosity, because it was the same way that the tribes were configured around the coffin of Jacob when he was led, that we wanted to be like angels when God revealed himself to the Jewish people, and the angels came down. The people wanted to be like the angels because the angels were close to God, and the angels were doing a mission. They had a name, and we wanted a name, and we wanted a mission, and we wanted a flag to represent our mission. Like, this is our flag. And I wonder if the Israeli flag is our mission. You know, the Magin David in blue and white, the blue and white of the blue of the Techeles that's often in a tzitzit. We have this blue color. The blue color is the color of the sea that reminds you of the sky, that takes you up into the heavenly thrones, where there's this sapphire rock that exists under the heavenly throne, this blue color that takes you from the seas up into the heavens. So the blue and white of the Israeli flag on some level does represent us as a Jewish people who are looking up, looking up at God. The farmer during the Shemitah year wanted to look up to the heavens and have faith that God was going to provide for him in the 6th year for the 7th, and the 8th year. And by the time he gets to the 9th year, then he's going to have another crop to help sustain him. That there's a faith and there's a trust that God will take care of us. So too the Jewish people, when they were wandering in the wilderness, we don't know where we're going, but we could potentially get very, very lost. We could potentially feel very, very alone. We could potentially feel that there's no point, and God's giving us food. He's giving us water. He's giving us direction, and he's taking care of us. So if we're open to that, if we're able to open ourselves up, and that's actually another reason given why it's in the desert, not just because it's available to everybody and because it's this open place, but because we have to be like the Midbar. We have to be like the wilderness. There's an aspect of we're born, obviously we all have an ego, and little children have very big egos. I'm living with a little baby, and it's all about, feed me now and do this to me now and change my diaper now. There's a lot of like me, right? Because they don't have a capacity to think outside of themselves as little children. And as we get older, hopefully we let go of this ego, self-centeredness, and it becomes more about other people and caring about other people more than we care about ourselves. But in the desert represents this sort of ownerless space, this space where there isn't like beautiful trees and magnificent vistas. It's just sand and sky, and it's just barren. And in that barren place, then we can start planting like we do in the Israeli desert. We can plant what we want, right? And we can nurture and grow what we want. And we can put water right where we want the water to go. So that will grow. That seedling that we planted in the desert, in the Sinai desert, will grow and flourish because we're putting our love and care on it. So too in our own metaphor of us as an individual that is likened unto a wilderness, that it gives us a clean slate. We're like a barren desert, like a white canvas. And what are we going to put on it? Like, it's empty, it's open, it's ready for us. It's not filled up with our ego. It's not. We came out from Egypt. We're eating matzah. It's that leavened bread. It's flat. It doesn't have like all of like me in it. I. It has this lowly place from which we can plant. We perhaps use our intellect to say, this is what I want to plant here. This is what I want to plant here. Like, be in more control of what grows within us, so that we can have the end result that we want, that we're reaching a destination. So when we think about traveling in the desert, there's the desert metaphor, which is like, open yourself up to the universe, open yourself up to learning new truths. Don't get stuck in your old ways. Like, can we like shift ourselves into a new direction if we need to? Can we grow the plants that we want to, that will flourish, the beautiful flowers, not the weeds? However you apply that metaphor. And also that we're on a journey, that we haven't ended. The 6-7 cycle that we talked about last week is a lot about a journey, that we're journeying through the 6 days of the week, and we're working hard and we're trying to achieve something, and then we stop and we reach a destination, which is Shabbat, and then we rest on our laurels and we say, okay, now all the food that I made, I'm going to eat, and all the things I did during the week, that's what I've done, and I can feel good about that, hopefully. Or the little bit of good I did that week, I feel good about it. Like, that's what I was able to do this week, and I'm done. I'm not going to be able to do any more of that kind of work now in this space called Shabbat. It's a destination. 6,000 years to the 7,000 year, we're destination. So too, our lives have a destination, and are we like? again, maybe this COVID days are times where we have less distractions. It is a little bit like a wilderness, and we can sit in our wilderness and we can be more mindful about what we want to get out of it and where we want to end up, and what, when we come out into the outside world, little by little by little, do I want to do with my time? Do I want to do with my intellect? Do I want to do with my emotions and my thoughts and my actions? And like, how am I going to re-enter the world, and what's that going to look like? And I think it's a great opportunity, actually, as we exit in some people here in Rhode Island, there's a little bit of reopening, coming out. So now we're a little bit out of our isolation, and we're coming out. So what's that going to look like? And am I in control of that? So there's a medrash that says that in the desert, there's three things that the Torah was given with. It was given with fire and with water and with the desert, in the desert. So we talked about the desert. The Torah was given with fire. Like that fire came down at that revelation of Sinai. There was fire that came down with passion. Fire can be used one way, which is healthy, and it can be used another way, which isn't healthy, right? It can burn and destroy and consume great forests and houses, and it can do real damage, or it can warm us, it can cook our food, it can give us light. There's a lot of positives on the other side that fire can do. So the fire that came down from Sinai, the fire that God kind of came down and manifested God's presence through fire. So let's harness fire. Let's use it well. And water. That the water that was apparently there were clouds also, and there was water that was dripping. But also that the water represents truth, and water kind of flows down. It goes down to the lowest place. It kind of permeates everything. That water comes down, and also the idea that the Torah was given after we went through the waters. We had to go through that Red Sea. We had to come to the Red Sea, which was a bank of water. And the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians are coming behind us, and we're stuck, and we don't know. We want to go forward, but there's water in front of us. And then Nachshon Aminadav steps into the water, and he goes more and more and more into the water. It comes higher and higher and higher up to his nose, essentially, and then the water split. And we put in our efforts, and through the water we came, and we were born. We went from the pregnancy of being in Mitzrayim in Egypt, where we were gestating, where we were like growing as a people. We came out through the Red Sea. We were born into the desert, and now we're growing up. Now we're learning how to walk. Now we're learning, that idea that as a child learns to walk, you stand and you entice the child to come towards you, and they're a little unsure and they want to hold onto your hand, and they hold onto your hand, and you help them, and then you let go of their hand, and they see if they can walk on their own, and they're scared, and they want to hold onto you because you're safe, and they want to hold onto you, and you go, no, you can do this on your own, and you hold back your hands and you let the child walk, and then you celebrate that they have walked and they've done it on their own, and how wonderful it is to get from here to there on your own, or the semblance of on your own. A different sense of achievement than if I had held your hand and helped you get from here to there. And what God's doing as we're traversing the wilderness is he's like the person holding on to the child. I'm holding on to you, but I'm slowly letting go, and I'm slowly letting go, and I'm getting you ready so that you can walk on your own. But I'm always here with you, just like the parent is always hovering over their child, hopefully. I'm there, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to keep you safe, but I'm also going to let you walk for yourself. I'm going to let you get the pleasure of feeling like you did this on your own, even though I'm here to protect you and I'm here to catch you if you fall. There's that, I actually don't know the story properly, but the idea that there's a person holding a child on their shoulders, and they're walking, and the child doesn't see the person underneath, and they're looking around and they say, where's my parent, and the parent's underneath, but they don't realize, they can't see the parent. It's like, my parent abandoned me, but the parent's carrying them. Again, another parable for sort of the way in which Jewish teaching teaches us that God is holding us up, whether it's from underneath, like we're on his shoulders, so to speak, or that it like the person around the child who's learning to walk, and we want you to walk, and we're encouraging you to walk, and we're giving you opportunities to flex your own muscles so that you get the pleasure of walking on your own. But I'm here to catch you. If you fall, I'm here. I'm going to hold you up, or I'm going to let you fall, and then I'm going to pick you up, but I'm always here with you. And these are the parables that are given as to how to understand that when we don't always feel God's presence, that that God's there, and that there is a mission, there's a destination, there's something that I have to learn. There's an adage that says that we only learn about ourselves. Let's see if I can find that where I wrote it down. That we learn about ourselves by adversity. Adversity introduces a man to himself. Adversity introduces a man to himself. That when we go through something, and we're all going through something, what are we being introduced to? Who are we knowing that we are? Are we able to access who we are? And are we seeing the divine spark inside of us? Are we seeing that we have potential that can be shone out? That can we be the star even when we're feeling enclosed? So there's a lot of things to ponder there. But okay, so let's go back over that. So in the Midbar, in the desert. What the importance of the desert. There's a barren place, an isolated place, a silent place, a place where we could get lost, a place where we don't have distractions, a place that's accessible to everybody, a place that is harsh, a place where there's adversity, a place where we're going to learn how to walk on our own, a place where we understand God's with us. We built this tabernacle, and we encamped around the tabernacle. The tabernacle at that time was the central focus of the Jewish world. The Jewish world was focused around that tabernacle because that's where God's presence rested, right? So we all were aware of that. We're all around it, and we're all focused on it, right? So perhaps it represents the tree of life. You know, Eitz Chaim, that tree of life that we hold on to. In the Garden of Eden, there was a tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In the center of the garden was the tree of life. And what's in our center? What's our center? What do we revolve ourselves around? And this week's Torah portion is teaching us, the Torah is telling us, God is telling us, put spirituality at the center. Put your soul at the center. Put Torah, put Jewish wisdom, put God wisdom in the center of your life. And then work your way around that in concentric circles, right? And have that be your focus. So we might be spokes, on a wheel, but the center is paramount, is crucial to how we live outside of that. So what's on the inside? Are we recognizing that God's on the inside? So in the desert, God was in the middle of the camp. What's in the middle of our camp? That kind of question. Okay, so then this idea of counting us, that we're 603,550, and that we were individuals, we had names, that we went before Moses and Aaron, that we were blessed by them, we were known by them, we mattered, that we have a mission that's entrusted to each one of us, that we have a flag and a color and a prince and an emblem that speaks to us about what our character is and what it is that we're supposed to bring out into the world, that we have that individualism, that we are stars, and we're also part of a huge collective like the sand, and that we have a role to play as a big, large mass of sand. So we're part of something, and we're also very individual. That the Mishkan is, So just a couple more points to add to that. So it says many times in this week's Torah portion that the Jewish people were encamped and then they traveled. They encamped and then they traveled. So the idea of encamping and traveling again speaks to this idea of, like, there are times where we're traveling and times where we're encamping. There are times where we're working and moving and times where we're taking stock, right? So it's not always like that we're on this fast wheel to nowhere, but there's taking stock that's part of the necessary work we have to do in order to keep moving, right? If we don't take time to reflect and to take stock, then we're not going to move ahead as quickly. So we have to have those times, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's 10 minutes in your day where you're journaling or doing some art or something where you can stop, or daydreaming. Say daydreaming is really important to do. That there's times where you journey, and there's times where you camp. And it's different for everybody, and the amounts of time for everybody is different, but that's an important part of our process, part of our journey. So we may be journeying to a destination, not quite knowing what that destination is, and yes, there's great value in the journey itself, and the journey includes encamping. Journey, we're moving, we're growing, we're experiencing, we're emoting, we're thinking, and then we're taking stock and we're stopping, and we have to wait and just let it sink in. Let's not just talk. Let's take a moment of silence. Let's pretend like we're back in that wilderness. Take a moment of silence and stop and work on ourselves and just be quiet and just reflect. Okay. So let's see. The silence in the desert are going to... Okay, so let's see if I said everything I wanted to say. So we talked about being in Mount Sinai. We talked about that being the central focus. We talked about the travels that we go through. We talked about the 40 years and why it's 40. We talked about the Mishkan, the tabernacle being the center, being God being the center, like the tree of life. And the value that we place to Torah wisdom. Is it like silver? Is it like lead? You know, like what is the value? How do we value the wisdom of the Torah? And we talked about stars and sand. We talked about, okay, so a couple of other thoughts before I close. So Aaron and Moses are our leaders. And in the Torah, I'm not going to read it inside, but it says that these are the children of Aaron and Moses. And then it just tells us about the children of Aaron. It doesn't tell us about Moses' children, which is very interesting. And one of the explanations given to that is because Moses was the teacher. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu. He was our teacher. And so the fact that the Torah tells us, and these are the children of Moses and Aaron, and then it tells us about the children of Aaron, but it doesn't tell us about Moses' children. But the implication is, say our sources, that Moses, being this quintessential teacher, that we are all his children. Aaron's children are his children, because a teacher, in essence, or the Torah definition of a teacher is someone who is like a parent, someone who is so invested in the life of their students, so invested that their students should embody the knowledge. It's not just knowledge to fill your brain for to pass a test. Obviously, it's not just a knowledge that's up in your head. It's a knowledge that permeates through your whole being. It's a knowledge that becomes you, right? Like it's not just a fact. It's a way. How do I be? Who am I? What do I learn? How to be a better person? How to be a kinder person? How to be a person with morals and values and ethics and all of these things? And how do I become that person through my teacher? Yes, through my parent. My parents teaches me too. And my teacher teaches me that. So the teacher, the role of the teacher, the role of Moses as the teacher is like a parent. We don't learn much or hardly anything about the children of Moses, because we are all the Jewish people as they're in the desert traveling are his children. Like he cares about them and he loves them like a shepherd and a sheep, right? We talked about that with Moses being the shepherd and being in the burning bush and taking the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law. That role, that character that Moses had to care about each sheep. The one sheep goes off, he goes after that sheep and brings it back. He doesn't say, "Oh, that sheep doesn't matter." No, that sheep is part of the flock. That sheep is important. That sheep is necessary. I have to go get that sheep. Right? So too, and again, it speaks about this idea of being important, even though we're a flock, even though we're a mass, we're individually important, and each one matters, and each one is entrusted with a job to do. And so too, Moses as the teacher. So it's speaking about the way in which a teacher is very, very, very fundamentally like a parent, or like a good parent, who cares and loves and is invested and is connected and all of those positive things about how to really, really, really embody in your student the values that come through what it is that you're teaching. I'm teaching you this so that you'll be a better person. I'm teaching you this so you'll become holier. I'm teaching you this so that you can understand the wisdom of the universe, that you can understand the transcendent truths, that you can come out of yourself, that you can minimize your ego, that you can become like this wilderness that's going to open yourself up to bring truth and blessing. When we talked about that medrash where truth got thrown down to the ground, the truth is the Torah, that it got thrown down and we're picking it up. And when we pick up truth, the proper pieces of truth, there will be peace. And that's the goal, is to bring peace and truth to the world so that we can finish this 6th millennium and get to that 7th millennium, which is the millennium of the world to come, where there's no wars, and the lion will will lie with the sheep will lie with the lion, and the plowshares will, all of that. Can't quote it, sorry. But there'll be peace on earth because the truth is being taken up. So as a teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu is the example of how to be a teacher who loves and invested in their students in such a way that they are like the parent. And so when it says that these are the children of Moses and Aaron, and it only lists Aaron's children, the extension of that, the extrapolation of that is that the children of Aaron are Moses' children because Moses is invested in them like any parent would be. So I think that's an important thing. Like when we're teaching, like how much we embrace our students, how much we embrace the people that we're learning from, and that we learn from them too. That is a two-way street. Okay, so that's Aaron and Moses. And then one last thought is that when it talks about the tribes of Zevulun and Yisachar, so in the other ways when the names of the different sons of Jacob, the tribes are named, they're named individually, but Zvulun and Yisachar are named together. That there isn't a vav, it isn't a letter dividing them to connect, that they're very connected, meaning that that they represent, Zvulun and Yisachar represent the one who learns Torah wisdom, who spends all day just like poring over the books and learning, and not going out and making a living, and the other brother is providing the funds. So I'll fund you. I'm not cut out to do all that learning. I'm cut out to work in the workplace. I'll make the money. I'll support you. So we're brothers. We're in this together. So you who are learning and me who are supporting learning, we're the same. Right? So we each are bringing that into the world, but in our own individual ways. And so again, there's this partnership, and I think that speaks to all of the Jewish people, that we're all, and back to this idea of stars and the idea of sand and the idea of being in the wilderness and the idea of the oneness at Mount Sinai and the idea of being counted, because we know we need to be part of the value, being part of something bigger than ourselves. That all of this speaks to the fact that we are responsible for each other, and that we are all needy of each other. And somehow, how can we minimize the friction, minimize the dissent, minimize the disconnect between us, and how do we find more ways to connect ourselves to each other with love and compassion, not with jealousy and anger, not with fire that will consume, but fire that will warm and embrace and bring us together that way. So I think those are pretty much most of the things that I wanted to talk about. And maybe just finally, that as we continue our journeys, apparently there were 42, I think there were 42 journeys that the Jewish people did in the desert. And we also have our journeys. You know, if you look back on your life so far, however far you've gone in your life, you look back and you say, well, there was this period and this period and this period, you know, and it does come together as a whole. Like, I learned this in this period, I learned this in this period. What can I learn from this period? And maybe we're still going through this period, you know, this COVID period, but maybe there's some value to thinking about what it is that we want to learn from this period, and using that as a way to give us to give us strength to go through it. Say, okay, this is hard. The adversity quote that I mentioned, that adversity introduces ourselves to ourselves, you know, like, how strong am I? How much can I endure? What am I good at? What can I do? How can I be? How can I release the anxiety that I have? Maybe it's through art, or maybe it's through talking to people. Maybe it's through journaling and writing. Maybe it's through exercise, cooking, like whatever people are doing. And I think somewhere in the day, I heard a talk by Dr. Pelkowitz, amazing, talking about anxiety in the COVID days. And he said, one of the things that's really important to do, even with little children, is to have somebody do a kindness for somebody else every single day. So the example he gave about children is like, if you're vacuuming, you give the child a play vacuum or an extra vacuum, and they're vacuuming. Obviously they're not, but they think they are. And they think they're important, and they think that they're helping. Right, so too, we need to feel like we're doing something. We feel like we've got something to contribute, and however we do that, let's find ways to contribute to our world, however small it is, however big it is. Find ways to contribute, to give ourselves this sense and this reality that we matter, and that we have something important to give into the world, because we do, and we all do, and we should recognize that honor that and be that. So my blessing to all of us is that as we journey through our lives, that we learn from the Torah portion how to see ourselves as individuals that are important, that have a soul that's going to shine, but we also see ourselves as part of something bigger and a transcendent entity that has a job to do, that we on a journey and that we have a destination. We don't know what the destination is, but we're on the journey and we're going to keep journeying. And sometimes we have to camp and sometimes we have to journey, and it's a mixture of the two. And that we, I do really want to just stress that this whole idea, it just seems to be that the wilderness and this idea of being sort of unsettled and uncultivated and frightening and foreboding, that's what the desert is a little bit like some of our experiences living in quarantine and not knowing what will be on the other side, and letting, on some level, letting God lead the way, and to rely and trust that God will take care of us, and there will be another side to this, that we will come out of the wilderness and we'll be whatever we have made ourselves to be, that some of that is in our hands to create and to cultivate for ourselves. So I wish us all a really productive week, a week where we recognize that we matter, a week where we have that mixture of stars and sand, where we have that mixture of camping and journeying, where we have that mixture of receiving and giving.